The rusty aircraft carrier Kuznetsov is tilted and submerged in the murky waters of Murmansk harbor. The faded and deformed container sheds on the deck look like festering sores. The island of the ship is entangled with yellowed scaffolding into a giant metal chrysalis, and dark red rust near the draft line spreads like a spider's web. This is the latest picture taken on July 3, 2025 by Russian. The latest images taken by military enthusiasts. 8.5 years have passed since it entered repairs in February 2017, and instead of returning to the oceans, Russia's only aircraft carrier is decaying faster in the Arctic winds, while its sister ship, the Varyag, has been transformed by China into the Liaoning and has led the way for China to build a three-carrier system. The Kuznetsov's trajectory of destiny has slipped into the abyss, becoming an icy symbol of the great power's decline. Disasters in the early stages of maintenance had already foreshadowed today's predicament. In October 2018, the PD-50 floating dock carrying the carrier sank due to a power outage, and the 70-ton gantry crane smashed through the flight deck like a giant hammer, leaving a shocking 4 times 5 meter hole. This is not only physical damage, but also exposed the loss of Russia's large ship maintenance capacity of fatal wounds. The Soviet era, all aircraft carriers are built in Ukraine Nikolaev shipyard, and after 2014 Russia-Ukraine exchange of bad luck, so that Russia is forced to self-reliance. In the absence of a suitable dry dock, the shipyard had to dig temporary puddles to serve as maintenance bases. However, bad luck came one after another. In December 2019, welding sparks ignited the ship's oil pollution deposited for many years, and a fire snake engulfed thousands of square meters of cabins, killing 2 people, injuring 14, and causing another severe damage to the power system. In 2022, a second fire exposed the management chaos. The 3 major accidents were like a triple curse, dragging the original 3-year maintenance schedule into a bottomless abyss. The outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian War cut off the Kuk's last chance of survival, and after 2022, Russia's military expenditures were skewed heavily in favor of the Army and Air Force, while the Navy's budget was cut to the bone. In the Russian military service in the order of voice, the Navy has been reduced to a bench player. The front line consumes 90% of the military spending, while the library ship can only share the resources of the sporadic each year. Satellite images reveal the harsh reality. From June 2023 to the present, the position of the container shed on the deck has not moved a bit. The island scaffolding oxidized to iron red, the chimney rust layer peeled off, and then no action. In recent photos taken by Norwegian military enthusiasts, construction crews are barely visible throughout the ship, with only seagulls perched on the rusted flight deck. While the Russian military is consuming $300 million a day on the battlefields of Ukraine, this giant ship, which once represented the glory of the Red Navy, is left to rot quietly in a harbor inside the Arctic Circle. The deeper crisis lies in the systemic collapse of the Russian military-industrial system. Most of the Soviet-era carrier engineers have been lost or aged out. The country lacks a core echelon of personnel to maintain large ships, and the average age of shipyard mechanics is more than 50. With the Su-33 long out of production and the MiG-29K abandoned by India due to reliability issues, the Russian Navy lacks a replacement. More serious is that the crew team was broken up and reorganized after the training is deserted. Since the beginning of the maintenance in 2017, the carrier pilots can only be in the Crimea, Nitka, land-based simulator training. Only 14 fighters passed the test in 2021. The actual deck landing and takeoff experience is almost zero. In contrast, China's J-15 pilots complete hundreds of takeoffs and landings on real ships every year, a gap as wide as the sky. Even if miraculously repaired, the treasury ships cannot make up the convoy. 22,350 frigates in service, only 3. The old Kirov-class cruiser air defense capability is not even as good as China's 052D destroyer. The Russian Navy's 60 billion ruble maintenance fund has been subjected to serious corruption and erosion in the layers of approval, and very little of it has been used for actual projects. More ironic is that when the Chinese shipyard for the Fujian ship to install electromagnetic catapult track, Russian workers are still worrying about the booster boiler antifreeze coating for the cushion. This Soviet era by the Ukrainian master of the special technology has become impossible to replicate. The extinction of the song. The division of fortunes is further emphasized by the fate of the sister ships. The Kuznetsov, launched in 1985, was the pinnacle of the Soviet Red Navy, while the Varyag, whose keel was laid down in 1988, was its younger sister. While the Kuznetsov barely survived the collapse of the Soviet Union, the unfinished Varyag was abandoned on the shores of the Black Sea, and in 2002 the rusty hull rolled over to China, where it underwent a complete overhaul at the Dalian shipyard, a complete replacement of the powertrain, integration of the phased array radar, and reconfiguration of the skidding deck, and was eventually reborn as the Liaoning in 2012. In the decade since, China has developed the Shandong ship, the electromagnetic catapult Fujian ship, and initiated construction of a fourth aircraft carrier with astonishing efficiency. The Kuznetsov, on the other hand, in the same time scale, from the combat carrier of the Black Smoke to Syria, to the shipyard nails. The temperature difference between the decks of the two ships, on the one hand, the steam-rising J-15, on the other hand, the J-15, 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 the J-15 and the J-15. The temperature difference between the decks of the two ships, on the one hand, the steam-rising J-15, takeoff and landing, on the other hand, the rust peeling off in the cold wind, measures the distance between the maritime ambitions of the two great powers. Even more historically metaphorical is the fact that while the Kuk's maintenance team is struggling in a puddle, a 100,000-ton floating dock made in China is lifting the Fujian ship for electromagnetic catapult tests. The debate over the future of the Kuk has never ceased within the Russian Navy, and in July 2024 the Russian Navy Command still insisted that the Kuk would return to combat in 2028 and that the 279th and 100th Naval Aviation Regiments would be rebuilt. But realists point out that the restoration would cost more than 60 billion rubles, enough to build a Gale of the North-class nuclear submarine, and that in the context of modern warfare, Zircon hypersonic missiles are far more cost-effective in conjunction with frigates than the maintenance of aging aircraft carriers. In the midst of strategic contraction, Russia has shifted to offshore defense, and after the sinking of the Black Sea Fleet's flagship, the Moscow, the Navy has become more reliant on nuclear submarines and shore-based missiles to guard its Arctic frontiers of interest. When China's Fujian ship Sea Trial electromagnetic catapult India to promote the third domestic aircraft carrier, the Kuznetsov spread on the deck of the Rust Spots, just Russia's dream of the ocean-fated mark. Western military analysts even joke that the success rate of cultivating edible mushrooms on the deck is much higher than letting the ship back into the combat sequence. A more pragmatic alternative has long surfaced. Russia is focusing on building the Type 23,900 amphibious assault ship, which, despite its tonnage of only 30,000 to 40,000 tons, is more in line with current offshore delivery needs. Standing in the summer of 2025, the Kuznetsov's predicament has long since transcended the realm of military technology and become a metaphor for the fate of the nation. 8 years in the maintenance dilemma, Russia is not without turnaround. After the accident in 2019, military expert Vasily Kashin has called for the lease of China's 100,000-ton floating dock. The main gantry crane of the Dokumen Red Star shipyard would have come from Chinese manufacturing, but the pride of a great power eventually overrode pragmatic considerations and ultimately chose to struggle in the homemade puddle. Instead of continuing to fill this bottomless pit, it would be better to let this veteran of the Cold War rest in peace with dignity. Transforming it into a floating museum may be the best place to go, so that the rust will become a historical inscription, telling the story of a land power that has missed the ocean for 100 years. After all, when the west coast of the Pacific Ocean Carrier Formation cut a deep blue trajectory, the Arctic Circle whimpering sea winds has played a requiem for the Kuznetsov. That the deck solidified rust red is the Red Navy's last bloodstain, but also an era of the last sentence.